Hey, this is Alan Birch. I'm the founder of Siempre. If you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey, listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I have a guest with me today. His name is Allan Birch, and Allan is a senior executive with a broad range of experience across a range of industries. After a highly successful corporate career, Allan has started a sustainability consultancy early in 2019. His passion in life is to help people and businesses succeed. He combines his skills in leadership, strategy, communication, and business acumen with his endless energy to help others make their businesses more sustainable. That means growing and protecting economic prosperity, engaging, rewarding, and developing people, and reducing waste to lower our environmental impact. So, Allan, hey, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Denis. Really great to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Hey, so Allan, I've given a quick brief on you. Just tell us a little bit more about your background, your experience.
Well, I'm a Waikato boy. I studied in Hamilton before I moved to Auckland to advance my career. I guess originally I was a science guy by training, but I quickly discovered my passion for business when I moved into my first sales role when I was 22. And it's then that I found engaging with people was my true passion and skill. That kind of led me through a range of leadership roles over the years in New Zealand and Australia and working around Asia Pac in all sorts of different roles. So, yeah, it's been quite a journey from those early days in Hamilton.
Yeah, I bet. And tell me, how did you get into leadership?
Well, I got my first sales manager's job in my early 20s, and it just kind of went from there. It seemed to grow organically. Every couple of years, something more got added, and over the years, it's been funny as I've had grads or people just getting started in their careers come to me and say, "How do I get ahead? What's the secret?" And my usual response to those people is, "You've got to smash the role you're in. You really got to do a great job of what you're doing, and then broaden it. But don't be afraid once you've earned that to ask for more responsibility and show that you're capable of growing." So I firmly believe you need to earn opportunities, but it all starts with doing a great job of what you're already responsible for.
Yeah, nothing like delivering well and executing on what you're actually going to say you're going to do.
Yeah.
And as you say, smash it and knock it out of the ballpark, as we say, another way of saying it. And if you do that, then your reputation, your brand, your all of that gets a lot better, and people start to think about, wow, what can this person do for us, which is fantastic, right?
It's funny how that just seems to happen. People say, "Oh, I got lucky." And I'm a big believer that you make your luck, you create luck, and you do the right things, and you'll get noticed.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you'll also get noticed if you don't do things well either. But you want to get noticed for the right things, right? So
exactly.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, look, you may have many of these, but I just want to ask you, who's your favorite leader? And this person could be alive or from history. So, who's your favorite leader and why?
Well, because I like telling stories. I think that's a great attribute of a leader. I've always admired Steve Jobs. I think the way he tells stories, the way he was quite a visionary. Many have read his books written about him. He may not have been perfect, that's for sure, but he certainly took Apple and all of us to a place that none of us could have imagined. So, just his ability to captivate us and tell a story. And I talk a lot to people these days about pitching and presentations and things. And I still think that launch of the, if anyone wants to ever know anything about how to do a presentation, just watch the launch of the first ever iPhone. I think that was pretty incredible. So yeah, he's someone I've always admired.
Okay, and tell us a little bit more about the storytelling. Why is that important for doing storytelling or using storytelling and probably actually doing it very well? Why is that important?
Yeah, it's interesting you raise that. I talk a lot about that with my clients because people are used to talking about communication. What's your communication strategy? And I encourage people in the sustainability world especially to think about telling stories because that's how you build engagement for me. And building, it's so critical in all leadership roles, but particularly in the sustainability world where you're trying to bring groups of stakeholders along with you, that you can tell a story that engages people's imaginations and helps them understand, what they can do or what you're doing, and be persuasive about the story you're telling. And it doesn't have to be, this is one of I think the mistakes some people make, leaders in sustainability, is that they think they need to have all of the solution developed. And my advice to people is to just start telling stories as soon as you've got them available, provided it's part of a broader plan and you know where you're headed. Bring people along, be authentic, and share your stories as soon as you can. And that applies to leadership. People will follow you for sure if you show your authentic, natural self and have the confidence, even if you're not perfect, to tell some stories. So yeah, I think it's an underrated skill that we all need to do more of.
Yeah, and I like how you talk about the authentic side of things, because I think people can start telling stories, but I mean, there's stories and there's stories. I mean, if you're authentic, that's great because people can see right through if you're not being authentic. But I really like it. So tell stories to build engagement. So engaging people in their imagination. And I know that, even when we're kids, or even if those who have got kids, they love to hear stories. And so why? I mean, I think it's taking them on that emotional journey, is taking them on a journey. Yeah. And if we can connect people that way, it's fantastic.
You think about in a social situation, the friends or people you meet who are the most interesting for you to be with, they're the ones that are storytellers, sitting around having a beer or sitting, all the social time, this time of the year, it's the storytellers that have the people standing around listening to them. So it's really cool. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's an art, as Allan's saying, team, and so get really good at it and utilize it. I don't think it will be like within 5 minutes you could probably have it done perfectly, but you've got to start somewhere. And as Allan's saying, start telling the story and practice at it, because I think it's a very, very important skill for sure.
Yeah.
So, Allan, the show is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title or that statement, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is changing, although it's kind of changing and it's not, I think, in some ways. You hear a lot about the speed of technology and how that's influencing our lives now. Sustainability, obviously, health and safety, especially mental health, are all putting demands on leaders now. Those things are moving much faster. However, I really think the essence of being a leader hasn't changed that much. Connecting with people, caring about them, and I think really caring about people. And there's one thing to say it, there's another thing to actually, go and talk to people and ask them face to face, what matters in your life right now. Really care about them, making the tough calls. We've been able to weed through, this has come through quite a bit for me over my career, being able to weed through the issues and make things simple. If you can get your strategy, I'm a big fan of getting your strategy on one page. And I talk to, in the sustainability world, people about businesses about creating a framework and a sustainability framework. If you can't tell your story or your strategy or your program in one page, I think you've got to go back and reflect. So connecting with people, really caring, making tough calls, simplifying things. I think that's what really counts, and it will enable you to cope with change really effectively.
Yeah, that's good. And as you're saying, showing that with the people is really good, because I think if we can do that really well, to storytelling and being able to help people understand where they're going, communicating really well, that's where you can engage with them. That's when they can act on things and get action happening, and that's when they can commit to the story, right? So to things as we do that. And I know that it's what you do in your business side of things as well, that you take clients through that to make sure they do that for sure. Which is really interesting to see. And, as you said, there is a lot of stuff changing, but some of it isn't. So there's a lot, probably another way of maybe saying it is there's a lot more focus in different areas. Sustainability is one, and we're talking about the environmental side, but there's also probably sustainability of an organization too. Would that be true?
Yeah. Yeah, people, when you first talk to companies about sustainability, people, I think, naturally think about the environmental side of it. But if COVID's taught us nothing this year, it's that social sustainability is super critical, right? We do have to take care of the planet. That hasn't gone away, and many companies haven't started on that journey. But the social side of things is really top of mind with the trauma and that people have been through, and just the anxiety and the demands on mental health. I think it's pretty critical. But I'm also ultimately a commercial guy at heart, and if you don't secure the economic sustainability of the business, then you can't create that ability to do those other things effectively. And actually, I was at the Sustainable Business Awards last week, and we talked a bit about this sort of thing amongst the group. And if you don't secure your economic future, you don't really create a platform to do those other things and take care of people. So it's about balance these days. It's about getting all three aspects of sustainability balanced, and it hasn't always been like that.
Yeah, cool. So secure the economic future to help give you a platform to go out there and influence and do what you need to go and do, possibly. So that's good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good. Hey, so how is your business? You talk about COVID and pandemics and things like that, but there's other things obviously happening around the world and change. How has your business or industry changed, and what demand has that put on you?
Yeah, I just reflected on the last few things I've done in the last couple of years. And if I reflect back to my most recent corporate role, which was in the packaging industry, things have really, you can imagine being in an industry where you sell packaging and suddenly sustainability is a big thing. Everybody wants to have a crack at you. So that's the people's attitudes, and social media has really ramped up on that as an industry, and forced businesses to really focus on the core of what they provide, really understanding the value they create. And that's a skill in itself, is to be able to distill the value that you create for your customers and for the community. It's been really tough for many, but COVID in a weird way has, even though it's put a lot of pressure on, has actually helped a lot of people in the packaging industry, because it's helped certain aspects. Some industries, some parts of that industry have grown dramatically. And so that's created a lot of revenue that maybe wasn't anticipated. Now I'm in that sustainability space. As an industry, it's growing very quickly. It's almost like not quite in its infancy, but it's still it's not really mainstream. The big A-list companies are doing it, but now that's filtering down to others as companies understand how they impact society, the planet, and how they might need to transform. And I think the tip for leaders going through that is to be able to think in a balanced way, because if they can't, they'll get left in the dust. And you just hear that again and again, and it isn't mainstream yet. I think people think sustainability is. I don't really think for every company it is, but it will become mainstream, and leaders will need to adapt to be successful.
And when you say it's not mainstream yet, what's sort of, and I know you're saying maybe a little bit in the infancy, but what's taken the time for it to become more mature? What's sort of been holding it back a bit?
I think for a lot of businesses, they think so, less so maybe now, but certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, it's a bit of a project, or it's an exercise we've got to go through to do our sustainability project. But the good companies now are realizing that actually it's not a project; it's the way we run our business. It's the way we behave. It's the way we do everything. It's embedded in our culture, and that's how we do everything. And it's a little bit like law of the jungle. If your largest customers are pushing down on you to conform and do those sorts of things, then you adapt, and if you want to be successful and survive, then you adapt. And so I think, as I hear more about, I working with a client last week who's got an audit coming up from one of their largest customers. Last year, the sustainability element of the audit was 2%. This year, it's weighted at 15%. So wow. that just shows you, publicly listed companies are having to conform and do a lot more themselves, and they can only do that through collaboration, and they've got to work with their vendors. So I think it's moving quite quickly now.
Yeah, and I really like what you said before. I mean, it's for some people it might be a tick in the box, but I think what you're saying is that people are starting to realize that businesses, it's a way of doing business. It's becoming, and that's really important for everybody, for sure.
Yeah. Embedding it in your culture, I think that's the secret.
Nice. Yeah, nice. Very good. Hey, if there was one thing that you could change in business as a leader today, what would that one thing be?
Oh, okay. I don't know if I'd change something. I think there's a case of if I think through the organisations I work with and the ones that are successful or the leaders who I like, I think doing more of something rather than maybe changing so much. So the best ones the best exec teams that I work with are really good at empowering, inspiring their people. So creating something and it's a cliche, I know, I almost shouldn't say, but it's a bit of a cliche to say, if you empower people and then inspire them, they will do great things. But I've just seen it so many times that it's so true, but you've got to do that holding to account as well. So more of that, and I've said this a few times, but more of the caring too, more of the understanding what makes people tick and what's happening in their family lives, probably do more of something rather than stop doing something else.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So do more of it. Yeah, and the other thing too, I like what you're saying there is as well as about empower and inspire people to go on to do great things with the combination of more care for people. It's a pretty strong combination that
it is. Yeah, I've found over the years, you learn the hard way sometimes, to create the strategy and then you go, why does everybody know what it is? I vividly remember a few years ago when same thing, we had a strategy and we talked about it with people regularly, but they just didn't understand. And it's like, it's not them, you dumbass, it's you. You're not telling, you're not telling the story in the right way. And in one role I had, we started doing, monthly staff breakfasts that were voluntary, but everybody used to come and we just told the story every month of what we were achieving and what we were working on. And eventually engagement scores were really strong. And it was like, oh, okay, that's how you do it, right? You talk to people and you listen to them and you increase your frequency. And
yeah, and that's what a mentor of mine always says is that, everyone can communicate, few can connect, and it's the connecting piece, which is the storytelling that actually helps you do that.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And as you say, a lot of people don't get the strategy of an organization. I always say that it's on a beautiful A4 and A3 piece of paper, and it's sitting up there on the wall in the cafe area or where you go and get your tea and coffee, and it's in front of everybody, and then they wonder why it's not actually happening. And I go, well, it's because you're not telling the story, as you're saying, Allan, and the other one is that you're not consistently telling the story.
Yep.
And if you're consistently telling the story and bringing it to life, so if I'm doing a certain job at a desk, well, then how does my job play into the bigger picture, the strategy? And if I don't get it, then I don't know. But most leaders don't know, so that's why they're not talking about it and they're not sharing the story. Is that what you find?
Absolutely. You've summed it up brilliantly. I think if you don't, one of the epiphany moments for me was when I was talking to someone in a manufacturing services function, and they said, I've got all these projects and I'm not sure how I key into the strategy, how that what I'm doing will help us execute. I'm like, what, really? And I just realized that I hadn't connected them to it. So we changed things and that helped. And you've got to, I'm no advertising guru, but that there's a reach and there's a frequency thing in advertising. And I think the same thing applies to leadership, you've got to repeat the message over, but make the message connectable. It's not get out of your corporate speak. There was a good quote that Norman Schwarzkopf had about, if I had a choice between someone that had great strategy and great character skills, I'd leave behind the strategy every time. I'll take the character. And it's beautiful. It's quite cool. I quite like that.
I think that's great. Yeah, very good. Leave the strategy behind. Take the culture, the character. Actually, is what you said, right? So that's really good.
Yeah,
very good. Hey, so employees. How are employees' expectations of leaders changed as you're working through your business, but also looking at other businesses too? Are you noticing that the expectations of leaders changing at all?
Yeah, I think they are, and I kind of, as I reflect on that, I think you have to be a little bit careful that you adjust your lens to whichever group of employees you think about. But certainly, the young, I think the under 20s and the 20s to 40s are living in a different world that's a bit more fast paced. I think people want to move through the business faster. They want more flexibility. That's the social side of things coming through. They're more clued into sustainability. I was helping a client do some recruiting a few weeks ago, and the recruiter said, "What's your client's sustainability profile?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Well, people ask that when they apply for jobs now. Maybe people are less thinking about building a long-term career and more thinking about how do I build a connection with an organisation where I can go and make a difference, or where I can contribute." And the whole concept of the gig economy, I think, is perhaps changing employees' expectations, because they're not so worried about shorter engagements. They back themselves and can move to different roles. Now, that's not the same for everybody, but certainly I think things have changed in the last 10 years in terms of expectations.
Spot on, yeah, and it's really, really good what you're saying there in relation to, they might not be in there for a 10, 15, 20, 30-year career, but they're going to go in there and whatever they're going to go and do, 2 years, 18 months, 3 years, they're going to make massive impact. That's what they want to do. But when they go into an organisation and they don't see that, they don't see the purpose or the ability to make that impact, what do?
Yeah, well, that's when you get that disconnect, right? You lose engagement, you lose that extra bit of discretionary effort that they can bring to the table, and if you don't fix it, then you lose them.
Yeah,
and if you don't have that, if you don't, everyone comes to work every day. Pretty much everyone comes to work to do a good job. Highly engaged people come and give you another 10 or 15%, and so if you can build that engagement, then as an organisation, it's a more rewarding place to be, and the organisation will do better too. So,
well, there's a clue there for leaders. You engage well with your employees, you'll get 10 to 15% more out of them. So be smart and look at that for sure. Yeah, that's very good. Hey, so what makes a leader successful today in this fast-paced, ever-changing world?
Well, I guess, like I've said a couple of times, I think simplify things. Be an integrator. Listen to a range of different views from across the business, but be able to simplify things, that caring thing. Share yourself, as I said before. Be authentic, and listen. I think those are for me some key things. And I sound like a Norman Schwarzkopf buddy, but anyway, I heard him speak years ago, and there's one quote that really stuck with me, and he said words to the effect of, "The truth of the matter is you always know what the right thing is to do. The hard part is doing it." And if you think about it, in many leadership situations, when faced with tough challenges, your gut will tell you every time what is the right thing to do. The trick is having the courage to do it, having actually been able to back yourself. And if you do the right thing, tell your story, and the rest is done right, people will follow you. So I think some of those well-trodden attributes are still relevant now.
Yeah, and Allan, I've seen a lot of leaders of the last couple of years who are coming out of senior roles and that, and they're looking at moving on, and they've gone, you know what, the last 12 months, 18 months, I've actually been bored, but they actually haven't gone out there and listened to their gut. They haven't gone out there and done things because they haven't been courageous. And then a major change happens in the organization, so it sort of forces them to go out and do it. Yep. And it puts them in a situation whereby they've got to go and do it. Now, for some of them, they want to slot straight bang into another role and make it easy, or they might want to just take a different role within the organization where their role's been disestablished. That's all good, but I always question: are we going to get the best of you? Is the organization, the country, going to get the best out of you if you're not moving on? And I think, as you said in that quote, it's doing it that's the hard part, right?
Yeah. Being honest with yourself.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that sometimes we do need to have those conversations with ourselves in the mirror and just be honest with ourselves for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, very, very much so. Here's an interesting one for you, and I know you're in that sustainability space, so this would be really quite cool to listen to. If I got your crystal ball out, where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
Well, let's hope we don't have another COVID in that time, and might be easy to predict. I think the social, I think the planet stuff is just a non-negotiable now. Everybody knows that we've got to respond there. I think the big change from a leadership perspective will probably come in the social space with more diverse workforces. You know, I read over the weekend that Progressive have set themselves a 2025 goal of having 25% of their workforce either Māori or Pacifica in management roles, And so that sort of leadership, I think, is the sort of stuff we will see in the future. More diverse, more representative workforces, more diverse leadership teams, maybe younger leadership teams potentially as well, because we've got quite a skew of with millennials and is it Gen Zs that are the younger ones now? There's, like, I read somewhere 2 billion people in the world this year, aged 20 years and younger. So, they're all going to get qualified and come out and have expectations. And so I think there'll be a lot of really exciting young talent entering our leadership teams that just have an expectation of social sustainability being top of mind. So I think that's going to be challenging for a lot of people, a lot of businesses to adapt to, but the ones that do it well will really prosper.
Yeah, cool. And the younger ones coming into the leadership side of things, what do we have who are probably more at the other end of our career, who are more experienced and things like that? What responsibility would they have in actually making sure that they set people up for success and all that, and the younger ones coming through? What do you think should happen there?
Yeah, I in my role where I've had grads, I've always kept the grads reporting to me because I've got a passion for helping young people be successful, and I think you owe it to your younger people to really hold their hand and nurture them to successfully into organisations so they can deliver. Because often the reality is they don't know how to work. They've come out of educational back. That's all they've seen, and you've got to teach them good habits. Nothing beats intuition, and that comes from experience. And often, if you haven't got a lot of experience, I think your intuition can be a little bit off, but you've got to let people make mistakes and develop. So I think our business that has a really good combination of experience and then young leaders is the ideal setup. I've got a client, I was just there workshopping with them this morning, and it's a private business, and the board has got 2 people in their 20s who happen to be sons of the founder, and they bring a really nice balance, and you can see how that business is benefiting from them asking questions that other people wouldn't think to ask, because it was, there's a certain, innocence about what they're doing, and it's just brilliant. It's so good to have that chat. But leaders have to be, more experienced leaders have to be prepared to be challenged. They've got to let their guard down and be authentic, so that the others can prosper, because you don't want to come across as a leader who thinks I'm open and accessible, but my body language says I'm not, or my behaviour or my tone says I'm not. So yeah, you absolutely got to be authentic and approachable for the emerging talent to flourish.
Yeah, definitely. And love to see the leaders actually are being a little bit more, as you say, authentic. Vulnerable could be another word that we might use there too. So then we relate to them as well. But, being open to learn, because if they did, there might be some wonderful things that can happen, and some wonderful shifts happening within their organizations too. Yeah.
Don't make yourself but a dinosaur, challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's why I say in my opening here in the actual podcast, right? So many leaders are not changing quick enough, and I think a lot of businesses aren't changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind, and that's the essence here. Absolutely. Allan, hey, thank you for joining us on the show today. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
Look, probably the easiest way to get hold of me is through LinkedIn. Allan Birch, so just track me down there and send me a LinkedIn request, and love to catch up with people. If anybody wants to have a coffee or a sandwich, then by all means, let me know, and I'd love to share some experience and have a chat. And I think you're going to put a link up somewhere that you can, with my email address or the company website too. So yeah, love to connect with some people.
Excellent. Well done. Allan, hey, once again, thank you for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they've been released. Download them, have a listen, put a review, a rating. And the other thing too is that share that with your network, your family, your friends. If there's any feedback you'd like to give me on the show, or if there's a question you'd like to ask me to ask my guests as I interview them, or if there's a question on the Ask Denis episode, feel free to send me an email, denis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey, listeners, don't forget on Facebook right now, there is the Leadership is Changing group, which is a community where you can join, and that's where we share insights, thoughts, and information around leading and change and so forth. All right, listeners, it's great to be with you on the show again. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.